So today I'm going to talk a little bit about direct object pronouns, what they are, when we use them, and important differences between Spanish and English. So first of all, what is a direct object? Because it doesn't do you any good to know about the pronouns until you know what a direct object is. So a direct object answers the question who or what receives the action of the verb. So if you're saying, I watch TV, who or what do I watch? TV. That's the direct object. She visits her family. Who or what does she visit? Her family. That's the direct object. So it can be either a person or a thing. So then why do we need direct object pronouns? And that's because if we don't use pronouns, our speech would be repetitive and tedious to listen to or read. So if I say, I visited my parents last weekend. When I talked to my parents last week, my parents said that the weekend would be a good time to visit, so I told my parents that I would plan on seeing my parents that weekend. Tedious, yes. So we replace my parents with pronouns so that we're not repeating ourselves over and over and over again. But one of the reasons that pronouns can be difficult is that nouns can fulfill multiple grammar functions. So in the above paragraph, the parents fills several different functions. Two examples of those are direct objects. So remember our question for if it's a direct object or not is does it receive the action of the verb? So if you're saying for the first sentence, I visited my parents. Who or what did I visit? My parents. So that's a direct object. That's parents functioning as a direct object. When I talk to my parents, okay, so we're going to say, who or what did I talk? Well, that doesn't make any sense, okay? So if there's any kind of preposition in there, it's not a direct object, it's an indirect object, okay? Because there's an indirect connection between the verb and the object because there's a preposition in there, okay? So anytime there's a preposition like to, from, about, anything like that, then it's not a direct object because there's something between the verb and the object. So I talked to my parents last week, and that's not a direct object. My parents said that the weekend would be a good time to visit. Okay, so who or what was said? Well, the thing that was said was that the weekend would be a good time to visit. So that whole sentence is the direct object. In this case, parents is the subject because my parents are the ones that are saying it. The subject does the action of the verb. Okay, so I told my parents, and this is where it gets really tricky. So who or what did I tell? Well, now that's tricky because I told my parents that I would plan on seeing them that weekend, right? But the thing that I told is that I would plan on seeing them, right? And who did I tell it to? My parents. So in this case, parents is actually indirect because I'm telling something to them, but in English we can drop prepositions. In Spanish we can't, so that's a little bit easier in terms of figuring out what the direct object is and what the indirect object is. So in English, it's tricky because you can drop prepositions. But what you're actually saying is I told this to my parents. I told them that I would plan on seeing them, and I told that to them, so my parents is indirect. And then I would plan on seeing my parents that weekend. Who or what did I plan on seeing? My parents. That's the direct object. So the first and the last examples of my parents are direct objects. The second one is an indirect object, the third one is a subject, and the fourth one is an indirect object. All right, so the pronouns in Spanish are me, te, lo, la, nosos, los, las. So me just means me, like he saw me, right? That's a direct object, okay? Or te is you, like he saw you. Lola get a little bit trickier because they can refer to either a person or a thing, right? So you could say, I saw him, and it would be lo vi in Spanish. Or you could say, I saw it, like a concert or a show, and it would also be lo vi because the pronoun is the same regardless of whether it's a person or a thing. Then nos is us, like he saw us, nos vio. Os is used in Spain to talk about all of you, you all. And then los and las can mean either them or all of you, and this one's a little bit more similar to English. So them can be a group of people, but it can also be a group of things, right? So you can say I bought them. It's you're referring to things, right? But I saw them could be either people or things. So that's a little bit more like English. Los and las can be referring to either people or things. And then in Latin America, it also can be a way that you refer to a group of people, right? So if you're saying los vi ayer, you could be saying I saw them yesterday, or I saw you all yesterday. All right, so in terms of the sentence structure, the direct object pronoun generally goes before the verb. So in this sentence, in the question, ¿lees el periódico todos los días? Do you read the newspaper every day? When you're answering, you say, sí, lo leo todos los días. And I see I'm missing an accent mark on días, but I'm not going to go back and fix it. So that lo is referring to newspaper, el periódico. It has to match in number and in gender. Since it's el periódico, the pronoun is lo. And then in English, you would say I read it, but in Spanish, you say I it. Well, the I is kind of disappearing in there, but you're saying I it read. So that lo goes before the verb, and that's one of the big differences is the object goes before the verb. In English, it goes after. And then if you have a verb phrase with an infinitive or a gerund, it can go before or after the verb. So if you have like, ¿vas a llamar a tu madre? Are you going to call your mom? Sí la voy a llamar, o sí voy a llamarla. You can put it either before voy. So you can say la voy a llamar, or you can attach it to the end of the infinitive verb, voy a llamarla. You cannot in Spanish put it in the middle of the verb phrase, though you can in French. And then, ¿estás mirando las noticias? Are you watching the news? You could say, sí, las estoy mirando. And either way, it's I'm watching them. You put it before the verb or after the gerund, so es, sí estoy mirándolas. That's not super important. I would say those structures are, especially at a beginning Spanish level, those aren't super important to know. But if you see those attached to the end of verbs and you're like, why is that happening? Well, that's the rule. They can attach to the end of an infinitive, which is an AR, ER, IR verb, or they can attach to the end of a gerund, which is that ando or yendo ending. All right, so now the really fun part. Okay, who's the subject of the sentence and who is the object? So remember, the subject does the action. So in the sentence, Juan sees Maria. Who is doing the action? Who sees and who is being seen? So hopefully you're saying Juan is the person that sees and Maria is the person that's being seen. And in the second sentence, Maria sees Juan. Who sees and who is being seen? And hopefully you're saying Maria sees and Juan is being seen. Now, how do you know that that's the subject and that's the object? How do you know who's seeing and who is being seen? What tells you that information? This always trips people up because we don't really think about it. We just know this. But in English, what tells us who sees and who's being seen is word order. The subject in English goes at the beginning of the sentence. It always goes at the beginning of the sentence, and the object goes after the verb. So the word order in English is called subject, verb, object, and that word order tells us in English, this is a subject, this is the object. But not every language has fixed word order. So then two sentences in Spanish. Juan ve María. And Maria ve Juan. Now, who sees and who's being seen? The answer is this is a trick question because both of those sentences are not grammatical. Because Spanish does not have fixed word order. So the subject doesn't have to be at the beginning and the object doesn't have to be after the verb. The subject can't be anywhere, right? There's rules to where the subject and objects can go. But they don't have to go in subject, verb, object order. So in Spanish, what you need to see who's doing the action and who's receiving the action, we need something else to tell us to make those sentences grammatical. And that thing is called the personal a. So the personal a is used whenever the direct object is a person, sometimes an animal, if it's an animal you love a lot, like a person. So the noun, if the noun has an a in front of it, it's never the person doing the action, even if it's at the beginning of a sentence. So now let's make those sentences grammatical, and let's put an a in there. That's the only way that they're grammatical in Spanish, is they have an a. So we say, Juan ve a María. So who sees and who is being seen here? So hopefully you're looking at that sentence saying, okay, Maria has the a in front of it. That a is telling me Maria is the direct object. That means she's being seen. The name or the person without the a in front of it is the person who's doing the action, the person that's seeing. So Juan, you're saying Juan sees Maria. And then these are other possible word orders in Spanish. A Maria la ve Juan. So who sees, who's being seen. And hopefully you're looking at that saying, a is in front of Maria, so Maria is still the object, Juan is still the subject, even though it's at the end of the sentence. And then the last sentence, ve Juan a Maria. So we've got the verb at the beginning. Word order is different, but again, a is in front of Maria, so that's telling you that Maria is the object, which means that Juan is the subject. So these are all different ways that you can say Juan sees Maria. Now, are they all used in identical contexts? No, there's different reasons why you might change the word order around in Spanish, mostly having to do with where you want the emphasis to be. Like Juan ve a Maria is like the most traditional word order. If you wanted to emphasize Maria, you would put Maria at the beginning of the sentence, and if you want to emphasize the verb, you could put the verb at the beginning of the sentence. So if you want to emphasize the subject Juan, then you would also do the same thing, that third order there, that third sentence. So mostly that's for emphasis. You don't really need to worry about that right now, but you do need to know that Spanish doesn't have fixed word order. So when you're trying to decide who's the subject, who's the object, you cannot rely on word order, because word order will lead you astray because it's not fixed in Spanish. So you're looking for that a. If there's two people in a sentence, you're looking for that a to tell you that that's the object, right? Not the subject. Okay, then same thing, direct object pronouns. Remember, they're me, te, lo, la, nosos, los, las. They can't be the subject of the sentence. So just like Maria, even if Maria is at the beginning of the sentence, if it has an a in front of it, it's not the subject. It has to be the object. The same thing is true for your object pronouns. And this is hard for us because we see, okay, there's a pronoun at the beginning of the sentence. So that's going to be the subject. Nope. Remember, word order doesn't matter in Spanish. So you got to ignore word order and pay attention to other cues. Like, what is the verb form telling you? Is the verb form telling you that it's the yo form or the to form or the he, she form? And then is there a personal a in there telling you that this is the object, or is there an object pronoun telling you this is the object, which means that something else is the subject? And then we're going to do a little bit of practice with this to give you a little bit of experience, because it's one thing for me to tell you about it, but it's another thing to actually practice interpreting these.